I want to start with a sentence we hear in almost every kickoff meeting. We'll figure out governance later, let's get something working first. It sounds reasonable, it sounds like prioritization. It is, in our experience, the single most expensive sentence in enterprise data work.
Here's a number that should sit with you for a second. The average cost of a data breach in 2025 was $4.44 million globally. In the United States specifically, 10.22 million. A record high, 15 years running as the most expensive region in the world for this.
And almost none of those breaches start with a sophisticated attack. They start small. An access policy nobody got around to writing. A dataset shared temporarily that nobody ever revoked. A new system connected to production with default permissions because the governance review was scheduled for phase 2. Phase 2 rarely arrives before the incident does.
Governance is, without question, the least exciting topic we've covered on this show. There's no clever architecture pattern, no impressive benchmark. Nobody claps in a kickoff meeting when you bring it up. But it is the topic most directly responsible for whether a project survives contact with reality.
Welcome to Discovery to Solutions, where we bring technology conversations from the whiteboard to reality. I'm Kavya Malhotra.
And I'm Karan Khanna. Today's topic has no glamour at all, and we're doing it anyway. Data governance, why it isn't sexy, why governance failures are catastrophically expensive anyway. The tools people actually fight about, Purview, Collibra, Unity Catalog, and how to make governance something that enables your team instead of something everyone quietly works around.
If you've ever heard someone on your team say governance can wait, this is the episode where we explain exactly what later has cost every time we've seen that sentence said out loud.
Let's be honest about why this topic gets skipped. Governance doesn't demo well. You can't put we have clearly documented access policies on a slide and get a reaction. It's invisible work. Nobody gets promoted for writing a data classification policy. People get promoted for shipping the dashboard, the model, the pipeline. So governance gets pushed to later, every time, in almost every organization we've worked with.
And the numbers back up how common this is. 3 out of 4 organizations now say they have some kind of data governance program in place. But governance and data quality issues are still ranked among their biggest ongoing challenges. The gap isn't awareness. Everyone knows governance matters now. The gap is between having a policy document and actually enforcing it. Less than 1 in 6 organizations describe their governance maturity as genuinely mature.
And here's where the boring framing falls apart completely. Poor data quality alone cost organizations an average of $12.9 million a year. Not from a single incident, from the daily ongoing cost of people not trusting the data, redoing work, making decisions on numbers that turn out to be wrong. Governance isn't the expensive thing. The absence of it is the expensive thing. It just bills you quietly, every month, instead of all at once.
That's the core paradox of this entire topic. Governance feels like a cost because you can see the meetings, the documentation, the approval workflows. The absence of governance feels free, right up until the month it very suddenly isn't. Let's make this concrete, because this is an abstract risk. This is a pattern we've watched play out in different forms across multiple clients. The setup is almost always the same. A team stands up a new data platform, fast, under deadline pressure. Access controls get configured with broad defaults because narrowing them properly takes time nobody budgeted. We'll tighten this later once we know who actually needs what.
That sentence is the entire incident, already written, just not yet triggered. Months later, sometimes longer, someone notices, or an attacker finds it first. A dataset with customer PII, financial records, sometimes health data, sitting behind permissions that were never actually scoped down. By the time it's discovered, it's not a configuration fix, it's an incident. Forensics, legal, disclosure obligations, regulatory exposure, all of it at once.
And the numbers on this specific failure mode are stark. Misconfiguration and governance failures remain one of the most consistent recurring causes of exposure, especially across hybrid and multi cloud environments, which is exactly where most modern data platforms live today. Healthcare breaches average around $11 million, the highest of any industry, because the data is so sensitive and the regulation so heavy. Financial services average around 6 million. And every one of those figures gets worse, not better, the longer the breach goes undetected. Mean time to identify and contain a breach is now down to around 241 days. That's the good news. It's the fastest it's been in 9 years. It's also still 8 months, 8 months of unknown exposure, sitting on a foundation that one access control review would have caught.
And there's a newer version of this exact pattern that's growing fast right now: shadow AI. Employees using AI tools the organization never sanctioned, feeding them company data the organization never tracked. 97% of AI related security breaches happened at organizations whose AI systems had no real access controls. And the majority of those breached organizations had no AI governance policy in place at all. They hadn't even started. It's the same story we've been telling all episode, just with a new technology wearing the same old missing seatbelt.
Here's the part that should actually motivate action, not just alarm. Organizations with a tested incident response plan save, on average, $2.66 million per breach. Extensive use of automation and AI in security operations saves another 1.9 million. None of that is about preventing every breach. It's about the fact that organizations with mature governance and response capability get hit less hard and recover faster when something does go wrong. Governance doesn't promise nothing bad happens. It promises that when something does happen, it costs you a fraction of what it costs the organization that skipped it.
All right, let's get practical. Because once an organization accepts that governance matters, the very next question is always the same: which tool do we actually buy? And the honest answer, like most of our episodes, is it depends what you're governing and what stack you're already standing on.
Microsoft Purview is the obvious starting point if you're already deep in the Microsoft ecosystem. It governs Azure, Microsoft Fabric, Microsoft 365, and increasingly hybrid and multi cloud sources, all from one place. And if you're building on Fabric specifically, this isn't really a choice. Purview is the default governance layer for one lake. Trying to govern a Fabric lakehouse without it creates real gaps in lineage and access control. Pricing shifted to a governed assets model last year, which made cost more predictable for teams already inside the Azure spend pattern.
The honest caveat on Purview: it can feel like assembling furniture with very long, very confusing instructions. Powerful once it's configured. Getting there can be genuinely fiddly, especially outside a pure Microsoft estate.
Collibra sits at the other end of the spectrum. It's vendor neutral by design, built to govern heterogeneous environments: on prem, multi cloud, legacy systems, modern lakehouses, all at once. Its real strength is depth of process, stewardship workflows, ownership assignment, multi level approvals, federated governance, where each business unit manages its own domain inside a shared framework. This is governance as organizational discipline, not just a technical catalog.
The trade off is cost and time. Base pricing starts around $170,000 a year, and implementation typically runs 6 to 12 months. That's not a tool you bolt on quickly. It's a strategic commitment, with executive sponsorship and dedicated resourcing required to make it land. Right tool if governance is genuinely a cross functional, multi system, multi business unit problem for you. Expensive overkill if it isn't.
And Unity Catalog is different again. It doesn't try to govern your whole enterprise. It governs your lakehouse, specifically your Databricks environment. Real time, automatic column level lineage across tables, views, notebooks, dashboards, and even ML models. Fine grained access control down to the row and column level. If your data and AI workloads live primarily in Databricks, Unity Catalog is often sufficient on its own for that layer, without needing anything else bolted on.
So the real question isn't which one is best. It's what are you actually governing and at what scope? One, is your platform primarily Microsoft, especially Fabric? Purview is close to a default, not really a debate. Two, do you have complex multi system, multi business unit governance needs and the budget and patience for a long rollout? Collibra's depth earns its cost there. 3. Is your governance need scoped specifically to a Databricks lakehouse and the AI assets built on top of it? Unity Catalog, on its own, is often genuinely enough.
And the pattern we see most often in practice, these tools increasingly get run together, not picked exclusively. Purview governing the enterprise estate, Unity Catalog governing the lakehouse specifically, each operating at the layer it's actually built for. The mistake isn't picking the wrong one, it's assuming you only need one when your data estate has genuinely outgrown a single governance layer. Now, the part that determines whether any of this actually works. Because tool selection is the easy half of this conversation. The harder half is making governance something people don't quietly root around.
Here's the trap: overly rigid governance slows everyone down, so people find workarounds. Shadow IT unsanctioned tools. Data copied into a spreadsheet because requesting proper access took 3 weeks, which creates exactly the ungoverned exposure that governance was supposed to prevent in the first place. Bad governance doesn't just fail to help, it actively manufactures the risk it exists to stop.
The fix that consistently works, a risk based approach, not a uniform one. Apply real friction only where the stakes justify it. PII, financial records, anything regulated. For lower risk, low sensitivity datasets, give people genuine self service. Let them find data, understand it, and use it without filing a ticket and waiting a week. Most organizations apply the same heavy process to everything, which means the truly sensitive data gets the same scrutiny as a public marketing dataset. That's not rigor, that's just uniform slowness.
And automate the enforcement wherever you genuinely can. Classification, access provisioning, policy checks, built into the catalog and the pipeline, not handled through a manual approval queue that becomes the bottleneck everyone resents. The future of this isn't more committees, it's governance that happens automatically in the background. So the friction people actually feel goes down, even as the actual control goes up.
And the leadership point underneath all of this, governance has to be sold on outcomes the business already cares about, not on compliance for its own sake. Faster, more confident reporting, fewer fire drills, AI models that actually work because they were trained on data people can trust. Organizations with genuinely mature governance report meaningfully better returns from their AI investments than those without it, not despite the governance, because of it. When people experience governance as the thing that lets them move faster and trust the result, the resistance disappears. When they experience it as a gate that exists to slow them down, they'll route around it every time they can. All right, a CDO calls us. Governance has been on the roadmap for 2 years and never actually gets prioritized. What do we tell them? Karan, you start.
First, stop treating governance as a separate phase that happens later. Build classification and access control into every new data product from day one. Retrofitting governance onto a platform that's already in production is dramatically more expensive than building it in from the start. We've never once seen the reverse be true. Second, tier your controls by actual risk. Heavy process on regulated and sensitive data. Genuine self service on everything else. If your governance model treats all data the same, you've built a system people will resist correctly. Third, pick your tooling based on what you're actually governing, not what's trending. Microsoft Stack and Fabric. Purview is close to default. Complex multi system enterprise governance. Collibra earns its cost. Lakehouse scoped on Databricks. Unity Catalog is often enough on its own.
And my addition, don't pitch governance internally as risk avoidance. Pitch it as a precondition for everything else on the roadmap actually working. Every AI initiative we've discussed on this show, every real time pipeline, every dashboard people are supposed to trust. All of it sits on top of governance, whether anyone labeled it that way or not. The teams that win don't treat governance as a tax on the real work. They treat it as the foundation the real work is built on. Because it is.
Boring, well documented, well enforced governance has never once made the highlight reel of a project. But it's the reason the highlight reel exists at all, instead of an incident report. Boring wins. Again.
So, data governance, genuinely the least exciting topic on this show. And by a wide margin, the one most directly tied to whether projects survive. Build it in from the start. Tier it by risk. Pick tools that match what you're actually governing. And sell it internally as the thing that makes everything else trustworthy, not the thing standing in the way of it.
If we'll figure out governance later, is somewhere on your roadmap right now. That's the conversation worth having today, not after the incident. We've cleaned up more of those incidents than we'd like to admit.
Next episode, we're tackling the topic everyone in this industry has an opinion about right now. LLMs in the enterprise, what's working, what's hype. If your organization has a co-pilot license nobody's really using, or an AI initiative that's mostly a press release so far, we're going to be very specific about what's actually delivering value and what's just noise.
See you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to us on Discovery to Solutions.